episode of the Market Pulse presented by Smart Touch. I am your host, Aaron Fichera, and today we have a wonderful roundtable of our friends from the north of Canada. Welcome. Today we've got Andrew Brethour of Brethour PMA. We have Mike Parker of Georgian Communities and Lianne McOuat of McOuat Partnerships. Panelists, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for having us.
Well, originally, when we kind of had this idea of bringing this group together, this was on the heels at the tail end of last year. Justin Trudeau announced his resignation and that there would be changes coming on in the political climate. We speed up 2 weeks from now. We have the inauguration of President Trump and the onset of what is now going to become potentially a trade war between our closest allies and our largest bordering state, Canada. To give some context to our audience, there are some similar and differences when it comes to our housing market, and that would be the crux of today's conversation is where are there parallels, where can we learn from each other, but also with this heightened political tension as well as the trade wars and tariffs, how is this going to impact both states? Similar to U.S., there is an affordability crisis throughout provinces in Canada. Rising development costs, Mike, as we've talked about, have constrained some developments, as well as the supply in luxury condominiums. Even though there's a flush amount, it just doesn't seem to be the right product type, especially for new home buyers. You combat that with your current interest rate being at 3%, which is a bit more aggressive than you see down here, with a target of 2.5%, and then tariffs coming down. Recently, steel at 25% and aluminum at 10%. There is a moratorium on the tariffs until the beginning of March, but to give some idea, especially when we talk about the recent effect of steel and aluminum, for the audience to know, Canada is our number one import. We import our 90% of our steel through Canada, and that equates to about 6.56 million tons of steel. So a 25% tariff not only will affect across the nation, but primarily construction and real estate. So on that note, a bit uplifting. Andrew, Canada becoming a 51st state. Is it going to happen?
Well, absolutely.
Sorry, that was tongue in cheek, of course.
Absolutely not. But let me just give you a Mike Tyson quote that I thought was very prescient. He said, you could have the best laid plan, you could have the perfect strategy until someone punches you right in the face. And Canada got punched in the face. And you can look at it in two perspectives. One, a tremendous wake-up call, an opportunity to exploit, expand, and grow, or a protectionist approach. We've been in a trade world with the U.S. since 1854. Was the first reciprocity agreement between our two countries, was our first free trade agreement. It was all about fish back then.
Fish and fur.
Minerals, but natural resources. But it lasted until 1866. Something got in the way in the U.S., like a civil war and the building of railroads across both our continents. And as a result, a pullback on a more protectionist basis. And by 1866, the U.S. Congress pulled back the free trade agreement at that moment in time. It caused Canada to form. It caused the Confederation of Canada at the time in 1867 because of the fear of becoming, well, it wouldn't have been the 51st state. I don't know. Maybe it would have been the 14th at that time. I can't remember, but I'd have to go back and look at the history books. The story of trade between our countries has been an actual incredible adventure. Through the 1890s, 1911, 1935, 1938, 1948, when we signed what was called the GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade around the world. And that remained in place until 1964, when the Auto Pact was signed. And the Auto Pact was a phenomenal agreement allowing the exchange of parts and materials back and forth between our manufacturing sector and the automobile industry. That's 60 years ago. And then, of course, NAFTA with Reagan and Mulroney in 1988 changed to U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, USMCA in 1994, in 2000 and 2017 under Trump renegotiated again. So this is not something new. This is something that's been part of our actually incredible growth of both economies for 171 years. Without reciprocal trade agreements between the two countries, it would be quite a different economic situation. But as we enter this current stage and get thumped by Trump, he looks at what he calls $200 billion deficit. It really isn't that much. It's according to the National Bank, closer to about $40 billion. And that's just on goods, not on services. If you actually include services, the trade deficit is ours, not yours. In fact, there's a surplus the other way when you include services like Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, etc. So the growth for the U.S. is phenomenal. We're your number one trading partner. And the really cornerstone of it rests on a couple of pillars. Oil and gas, where 60% of your imports come from Canada. You consume 19 billion barrels of oil a day, but you only produce 13. Canada makes up most of the difference, 4.5 to 5 billion barrels every single day. And you buy it really cheap. It's discounted because it's heavy oil, has to be refined in Houston, and is bought at a 15 to 20% discount from West Texas crude. And it is then refined, turned around, and sold back to Canada and the rest of the world at a profit. So in fact, the 10% tariff on oil that just got put into place, or maybe got suspended part of the 30 days, I think it did for the moment, but any impact on oil and gas is a huge impact upon U.S. prices and cost of gas, particularly in the West, particularly California and the Midwest, Chicago West. Most of that oil comes from Canada. The other interesting parts are, you already mentioned steel at 90%, aluminum is 90%. Those both were hit with 25% yesterday. Those will be direct, immediate costs. Lumber, drywall are two elements that are priced in U.S. dollars because of the amount that you buy from us. And we provide you with enormous support in drywall and lumber, of course, that directly affects housing. So are we going to see increased costs? Well, I'll let Mike from Georgia perhaps address that a little better and more specifically, but absolutely, both for the U.S. house builders and for the Canadian product as well. And then what happens on a reciprocal scene? I really believe, and I'll conclude with this, and then we'll move over maybe more specifically to real estate. But I don't think this is about trade. This is about some specific policy differences that Trump wants to see take place. And for us, it's an enormous wake-up call against a partner that I think we became somewhat complacent with. 78% of our trade, most of it all from Southern Ontario in manufacturing and goods and services, automotive, etc., is with the U.S. And we became complacent to the extent that it was one of our singular only trading partners. We also have huge trade barriers internally in Canada from province to province, as if it were like from state to state, which you don't have the same experience. And simply by opening trade with one another in Canada internally would reduce our costs by 21%. Goes a long way against any tariff. But this isn't about trade, I don't think. This is about border security. This is about Arctic security. The Russians and the Chinese are both in our Arctic, planting their flags on our sovereign soil. And our one submarine, good old Canadian submarine, we have one, and it's in dry dock. And as a result, there's a real concern. Why did Trump target at Greenland? Because it actually should be a Canadian territory.
And Andrew, to that point, I mean, is it kind of felt like the tariffs are less directed at Canada, but more indirectly at China, and kind of the cheap steel that's been dumped from decades prior?
Yes, it can be. There's a clear drug related issue with China that's coming into Canada with fentanyl. Now, there's also the Mexican cartels are actually producing within Canada some of the things we weren't even aware of. And so that's a really important on border security. And it's something, by the way, we should have been doing years ago and have now, I mean, the 30-day reprieve under the under this tariff scenario is really about both Mexico and Canada standing up and putting something of some substance on the border. That's really important. We have a real gun problem from the U.S. into Canada. 85% of guns that are confiscated in crimes in Canada are illegally smuggled over the border. So we really have a reciprocal issue here along this border that has to get dealt with. Should have been dealt with a long time ago. I think it is being dealt with, and it's long overdue. NATO is another. We're a laggard. We've relied on the U.S. for our protection forever, and our contribution to NATO is at 1.3%. The promise of NATO is at 2% of GDP. That would take an expenditure in Canada from $40 billion to $80 billion. We'd have to double it to get there, but it's something that I think has to happen, and it's on Trump's radar. Has been since his first term. He got out of the 30 plus countries in NATO, 27 of them met their 2% target. Canada's the laggard, the least of all. So that's a clear one. But there's also tremendous friendship, cooperation, integration. Our economies are so intertwined and so like-minded. I mean, you've got a great friend to the north who supported you in war.
Every war.
I mean, it was our firebombers over Pacific Palisades. You know, it's every scene we've been arm in arm for centuries. And other than the War of 1812, when we burned down the White House, you know, I don't want to.
That one was a bit sour.
I don't want to do that again. So I don't think there's a confrontation here. A 51st state is more confrontational than it needs to be. And although it gets great coverage in press and headlines, we love a car crash, right? So that generates. But that's not the direction we're going. Cooler heads will prevail. New and stronger trade agreements will occur. We need your investment. We need your investment into what we call the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario, which is the greatest supply of rare minerals in the world, even outside China. So of all the rare minerals, cobalt, lithium, etc., that is the future of our next generation. So we need that investment. We want it. We want to find ways to work together, not in opposition. And we're going to go through some bumps and grinds. Now, I'll stop there because you get me wound up. I take over your whole podcast. But the impact on real estate is really pretty simple. Confusion leads to uncertainty to inaction. And so any consumer, you and I included on this podcast, when we're faced with great uncertainty, we sit on our hands, we decide not to move forward, in particular with something as powerful an investment as my house or real estate in general, whether that's commercial, industrial, residential. So through this period of confusion, this first half of 25, it's going to be bumpy, and particularly in markets that are already going through a very serious correction, like Toronto and Vancouver, Montreal to a secondary degree. Alberta's a little different. And by the way, you know, real estate's very regional, so it's different for Mike in Central Ontario as it is for Dallas versus Naples, Florida. So you've got a very regional issues here in real estate that are quite different right across the country. Very similar to you in the U.S. by that regional differences, but we're not in for much of a recovery in this first half when we thought we might be there. I think you mentioned off the top interest rates, Bank of Canada. We've dropped them 6 times, and we're going to drop them again. And we'll have to keep dropping, impacting even the Canadian dollar, which is currently at 68.5 cents this morning. It may go as low as 62 or 63 cents as we move rates down to probably as low as 2% for the Bank of Canada to stimulate economic growth that's been flat as a pancake. And we have no GDP growth, and you have very strong growth. So the stronger you are, the better off we are eventually. We just need to have some kind of recovery here for real estate generally. It's not going to happen until the second half.
Well, to that point, as we get to, a wonderful perspective, and it gives us a perfect segue to, same thing, regional, and there, it's very nuanced. We can't paint a broad brush and just say this is what the real estate or market is looking like. And to that point, as we go from macro to micro, Mike over and Lianne over and what you're seeing, especially let's say Georgian communities, how are you planning or how are you seeing these tariffs impacting an already stressed housing market?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously monitoring the situation closely. I'm more involved, obviously, on the sales and marketing side. However, on our weekly calls, it's something that we recognize that we obviously have to pay really close attention to. We have already started to do some analysis on what this could mean to our prices. The reality is, though, like any developer, we have contracts that are committed. We have homes that we have to build. And, that's the risks that you take as a developer and a new home builder. So I think right now we're more in let's just watch and see. We're not really doing a lot of action. There's not really much we could do. But whenever Andrew mentioned about the second half, I got to say, last October, I was feeling a lot more optimistic about the first half of this year, last October. And then within 30 days, I started to feel, oh, here we go again. It's really, for me, it's been tough since midway through 2022. I think pretty much everyone. But, it's already been a couple of years, and I've been very optimistic, saying, okay, we're on the right side of everything now, and 2025 is going to be so much better. And then come November, really starting to question everything.
Do you feel that's just it was a byproduct of the elections and what's going down south, or were there any other indicators that kind of gave you that pause or change in forecast?
No, I would say the political environment, both here in Canada and, of course, in the U.S., the Trump, I don't remember what Andrew called it. Sorry, I didn't want to say the
Trump.
Yeah, the Trump thump.
The Trump, I was going to use something else.
Anyway, trademark it before it gets taken.
Thump has definitely been, I would say, bigger. If I had to pick which one I feel has, caused more uncertainty for the majority of the public here, I would say it's the Trump thump. But yeah, so we're cautiously optimistic, I guess I'd say right now. But I agree with Andrew. The first half of this year, it's not going to look much different than the last half of last year, or even the first half of last year. So
yeah, I've got some stats actually, like Mike speaking as builders from the builder's perspective versus Andy and I from a consultants, people servicing the building industry's perspective. But in Canada, the same as you guys have the Wells Fargo Housing Market Index. In Canada, the Canadian Home Builders Association surveys builders across the country. So a couple of stats from the fourth quarter. So this is before the tariffs, but we knew Trump was coming in and we knew the tariffs were likely. The single family builder confidence level was 25.1. These are record setting lows, all-time lows. So 56% of single family builders also rated current selling conditions as poor. Comparatively, the Wells Fargo HMI was 45 in the fourth quarter for U.S. builders. And 52% of Canadian builders said they are not feeling very confident or optimistic right now. Also, in terms of traffic into their sales centers, 70% of builders rate their traffic level as low or very low, and 34% that rates need to fall even further before it would give them a reason to have an improved outlook. So they're absolutely looking at volatility, instability, ambiguity of buyers, uncertainty of not knowing where things are. And that's leading all of us to focus on adaptability. Well, all my abilities. Yeah.
Well, Lianne, how do you, it sounds like we're right there on the cusp of, it sounds like 50-50, that kind of confidence. And then, Andrew, to your point, and Mike, even on the builder side of saying, hey, we're going to pause or wait till it. How can we convince buyers now's the right time to buy?
What we're selling right now is not just the homes. We are selling confidence. And for too long in the Toronto marketplace, for sure, and oftentimes in the Canadian marketplace, because our prices went up so fast, Aaron, that many people in the market today, they've only known a good market. And what they've been selling is prices go up. They were selling investment. It was easier for real estate agents to focus on, well, if you buy at this price, it's going to go to this price. The average price in Canada is, $600 something thousand in Calgary, which is pretty low considering that in Toronto, it's 1.5 million for a detached home. Wow. So Calgary's never been, because their market is so tied to oil, their market has always gone up and down, and it's never been able to really rise the way Toronto and Vancouver are. But, those prices being so high, it means that builders, there's very few people that can actually afford what we are selling right now. And we can't sell on prices going up. We have to sell end users. We have to sell lifestyle. We have to focus on buyers that have true needs. These are people that are having babies. These are people that are getting a divorce. Divorces are 3 real estate transactions. So we need more of those divorces, inheritances, relocators. Those are the main people that we're talking to now. We can't talk to people about, the price is going to go up, so you should buy this. And that's really hurt the condo market. And because that's where most of the investors buy, is in the Toronto condo market. So we've got a real issue there.
How has the impact of foreign investment been on the housing market?
Well, we banned foreign investment a couple of years ago, right? Andy, how much longer does it last?
Well, Trudeau extended it till
2 more years.
Two more.
I think it's January of 27. So we've got another full 2 years of a ban on direct foreign investment, not in commercial real estate or industrial, but on residential.
Well, did you feel that moratorium helped?
It was negligible in the beginning. It was a very small portion of our total volume, less than 1.5% to 2% of total sales absorption. It varied by market, stronger in Vancouver with a strong Asian influence, and a little stronger in Toronto with South Asian influence. But for the most part, it was a small proportion of market. What it did do was psychologically turn a message that said, we're really thrilled about immigration, but we don't want your friends and relatives buying houses at the same time. So we don't want your money. And that psychologically hurt us, I think, in Canada. So although the gross numbers weren't big, it was not a great message. And I think that message will disappear. That'll get rescinded fairly quickly with a change in government.
Well, into
even a change of Trudeau, it'll change. That policy will change.
Well, and to that point, do you feel, and Lianne, I'll pass it to you.
I was just going to say, we're having our election, right? So we're anticipating that some of those things might change with some new leadership. There is a discussion by PP, Pierre Poilievre, the potential future prime minister, that he's going to remove the tax on new homes, which would make a huge difference for us because we do pay a huge amount of tax. And municipally, there's a lot of municipalities that are looking at reducing and sometimes even eliminating the development charges. So, with the new elections, we have a provincial election in Ontario coming up in a couple weeks, and then we have a federal election as well. So all of those things are going to make a difference.
And, I know you all are more closer to the politics. I mean, immigration and rising prices was the kind of cornerstone in the U.S. elections. Do you find that's kind of the platform that candidates are running on, is immigration, housing affordability, or just affordability in general, for better or worse? What's your takes, and maybe educate us?
Well, Canada's had a great history of immigration, as you have. Yours is by lottery. Ours is by merit and by point systems. So we were always, of which Trump has reviewed and has made comment about copying the Canadian immigration system. It's a great, great system. It allows for needs in different regions to be satisfied. Doctors in some areas, trades and carpenters in another, and through family reunification. So it's a really great system. What happened was that we were generally running at around an average of around 300,000 new immigrants a year, It's in a population of 40 million. So it's not, well, at the time, let me put it 35 million. But in the last 5 years, we had this kind of behind the scenes conversion from temporary residency and visa and students to permanent residency. And it was no small amount. It was over 1 million a year. And in fact, our immigration levels, which were, published at 350 to 400,000, were actually 1.5 million. And we ran 5 years of that. Well, that was for our understanding of immigration and its need for economic growth and supplying areas of need across the country was very important, but we overwhelmed it. And you overwhelmed the same with an open border at the south end, but a totally different set of principles in terms of who that immigrant was. So yours was, let me just call it unedited, and ours was edited. And so at the same time, we've cut it back now again. So this will be the next couple of years, will be the first time in 25, 30 years where, you're actually seeing headlines of negative numbers of immigration, even though the levels will still be maintained at around 350 or 400,000. But, we had things, the strain on our system was enormous. The strain on rental accommodation was enormous. Rental prices went to the moon. The strain on social services beyond belief. All the same things you hear about in the American context, only 10 times as much. And so the change in immigration is important to try to balance, if we can, some degree of supply with demand. And what happened was both the federal levels of government, provincial levels of government, municipal levels of government were never prepared. There was no plan for 1.5 million a year for 5 years running. There was no plan for adding on or expanding urban boundaries. In fact, many urban boundaries shrunk. The average time it takes for Mike to get a plan approved, for Georgia to get a plan approved when he buys a piece of dirt in and around the Toronto region is 10 years to the time that he actually can shovel in the ground.
We have a few regulations, Aaron, just a few.
Okay.
We're more
A
regulated.
lot can happen in 10 years. We just saw in 2 weeks, so
yeah.
Who the hell knows what's going to happen in a decade from now?
Exactly. So what we need is here in Canada is deregulate, dezone, and develop. And that seems to be, in part, finally, the supply side of the equation is being talked about. I've been talking about this for 30 years, a kind of a lonely voice on the supply side of housing. But we predicted back in 2005 what we would see by 2020, and I might have been out by a percentage or two, but the pressure on pricing, when you restrict supply of our raw material land, you force the price of product up. When you restrict the type of product allowed to be built, we shifted to an intensification, much greater, higher density product, all based upon presumably sprawl, which I could argue isn't really there, but compared to Dallas or Houston, but the end result were prices that doubled, then tripled, and of course incomes can't keep up with that kind of thing, or we'd be in a totally different discussion here about recession. But it's a marketplace that has to go through a correction, which we're going through now. We will get there, and it's going to take a little bit of time for this balance to come in. But for the first time, we're talking about supply. I'll just throw one other thought back to Mike and to Lianne. What we're talking about at point of sale right now is, how do I take a consumer and go back to get them to love it? Ours is about love. It's not about, how do I motivate love for my product?
It's about the heart and not the mind. It's the magic and not the logic.
I can't make the accountant see the rational decision on price versus carrying cost. That's going to take some time to pull it together. But I've always had to put love first, and we kind of lost love for the last, I'm going to say at least the last 5 or 6 years. I think Georgian,
we've kept the love.
Mike's got the love.
We've always kept the love, Andrew.
Georgian.
And I think that's why we position ourselves in a bit better of a situation than, a lot of things that we can talk about, where we're building, the types of homes that we're building. we're not talking about, for us, we're not talking about downtown Toronto and these high-rise condos. And we're really not a company that offers a ton of investment properties. Of course, Lianne, as you know, at Windfall, our site next to Blue Mountain, Ontario's, four-season resort. And I'd almost argue, in some respects, Canada's four-season resort area, so we're in a really good spot there. And sure, for our semi-detached, we did have investors coming there, or second homes, call it, more so than not even necessarily buying a semi-detached and to rent it. But we did have a big market for a long time where people that lived in Andrew and Lianne's area, they'd buy a semi-detached as a second home, come up there on the weekends or use it for holidays and whatnot. For us, we've lost that though. So we've been impacted not so much by investors, because that's never been our product, but we have been impacted by people looking for secondary and recreational properties. We have felt that as well.
Well, and to that point, with kind of the political atmosphere coming locally, domestically, with the current elections around deregulation, development costs, immigration, as well as outside foreign investment, how is this impacting your decision, or from a developer builder standpoint, how are you navigating?
It's a great question, and we've obviously been.
It's a large question, so
Yeah,
please have the time to unpack.
Yeah, no, I think I just try and keep it as simple as possible, because it's something we could talk about forever. But I mean, for us, a big part of what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years is maintain our team, keep our trades active, keep them on site, keep building, not lay off any of our staff, and just kind of stay the course as best we can. And I think, kudos to the ownership here at Georgian of being able to do that for myself and for everyone else that works with Georgian, because we haven't laid anyone off, and essentially we've kept all of our trades. Now, we've had to build, a lot of what you'd call speculation homes, right? We're building homes before they're sold, and we've put a significant investment to do what we're talking about. But we've always been pretty bullish that if we time this and we just do keep going, and how we felt last year, that the market will start to come around in 2025. We're not starting from scratch. Someone wants to buy a home, we can give them a home in 30 days or 60 days, right? Not having to wait 12, 14 months. So, that's how really we've been managing that. And again, you could unpack a lot more, but we've just tried to stay the course as best we can. And like I said, keep the team going. And with the outlook that people will need homes, we're not looking for investors. We have the homes that those people that Lianne mentioned. We don't have to tell people. We don't even get into like, hey, it's a price per square foot. Is it? People might look at it that way with us, but we're not like, hey, it's X dollars per square foot, like an investment property in downtown Toronto. We do say, hey, there's trails in your backyard. You can walk across the street right to Blue Mountain, get on the ski lift. So we've always kind of had that. And that's where, I feel fortunate being responsible for sales and marketing that, we've always had this great story, and we can continue on with that. I think we just got to be doing a better job. Our company, along with like Lianne and her agency, we just got to do a much better job at telling the story, because for so long, people just had to drive by and pull in our sales center, and that was it. Now we just have to make sure people know what we have to offer. And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to look at Georgian's website for their community, Braystone and Windfall, both incredible communities that have done such a great job storytelling, and they do a lot of their material in-house, and we've worked with them since 2011. But they're really focusing more on the lifestyle and less about the product, although the product is amazing. And that's really, marketers in the Canadian market right now in the real estate industry, we are focusing more and more on storytelling. Our agency always has, but anyone who was telling the story of an investment before, now they're telling the story of the value and the lifestyle, not the home. So the heart over the head.
Well, and to that point, Lianne, are you seeing that, developers and builders like Georgian are better positioned because they didn't take that kind of the highs and the lows of the market of buy now, this is a great investment, and basically held your brand or story around investment. And now you're kind of having to shift back where maybe Mike, you guys laid down the foundation of the story for years, where it's maybe looking a bit stark when it's saying, hey, we going over here and then we got to pull the lever and go back. And
our agency is really well positioned because we've always focused on storytelling and end users and didn't really buy into that investment and, selling through brokers mindset as much. But I can tell you that we work for about 80 builders, I think 107 builders last year, maybe about 100 or about 85 active builders right now. So these are builders that have inventory. They have homes that are built, like Mike said, so a lot more spec building. So it's a different way of selling. It's almost like a resale mindset versus this long-term pre-construction. And then we have builders that are selling in small towns, like just back to the tariffs. We've got clients that bought large communities in small towns close to the border, places like Niagara, Welland, Woodstock, these towns that are primarily built around manufacturing, because Ontario in particular is a lot of manufacturing. So that's a big concern because, yes, they were selling investment because they're much lower priced because they're outside of the city core. So you can buy a detached home there versus, Markham, Richmond Hill, where I am is 1.5 for a detached. Out there, you can buy for 900,000, 850,000, which still sounds pretty high to an American, but to us, that's great. So we had a lot of immigration into those small towns and a lot of people still buying for investment purposes. And again, they were focused entirely on buy because it's cheap. Now we have to sell the lifestyle of these small towns and convince people that, hey, the American manufacturing, this is just going to be a blip, but it's going to come back. Maybe not to the U.S. We have a lot of other countries that would love to buy our manufactured products.
One thing I'll add to both Mike and Lianne's commentary, because they do such a great job, both of them, but it is once you've created the first impression of love, it's like a long-term marriage. And how do I stay married? Is incredible communication. And by the way, I'm almost an expert at this, after multiple years of trying, and some successful, some not so successful. Communication with that limited now number of prospects, whether it's just a shock in the system from a Trump thump that diminishes demand, or it's actual real demand contracting given economic conditions that varies by region and any place across the country. The most important factor is you set your story about what sets you apart and how great you are as a builder of community and your product and make you fall in love with me. But I have to stay married to you because you're not going out with me maybe on that first date. I may not even talk to you again, or you may not want to even talk to me again for weeks on end, but I need to talk to you. So it is about communication, follow up. We're finding that our teams are spending just enormous amount of time to find new areas of discovery to talk to you. And how do I do that with a consumer who's both reluctant, concerned, confused, and yet also strained by affordability? I have to spend so much more time. And it's respectful. I'll give you a great book, Unreasonable Hospitality, brand new. And does that show up backwards on my screen? But Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Gardera. It's a great book, A Restaurant in New York, and how the things that he did to outreach to consumers to actually create unreasonable hospitality. It's a fantastic book for us in these times. I offered to share. It's on Amazon.
So I'm going to throw my plug for CRM in there just because it is the Smart Touch podcast. Jordan has been a Smart Touch customer since the beginning, actually, before Mike's time. I think 2011, they were one of the first Canadian builders that we signed on for Smart Touch. But CRM, exactly to Andy's point, communication and sales teams, we're sending you the leads. That's what I will say. We are getting a lot of people going to the websites. A lot of people are poking around. To Andy's point about this being a relationship, I will advocate forever that your website is not meant to fully inform people. It is meant to inspire, so they will inquire. Anyways, I just came up with that. It's a rhyming thing.
That's perfect.
That's great.
That's perfect.
You like it? Instead of informing, and a lot of builders want to just put everything out there. So if you use a dating analogy, on your profile, you're not going to put every little thing about you. Definitely not all your measurements, because you shouldn't judge people by their measurements, just like you can't judge a house by the room dimensions.
Leave a little mystery.
Exactly. So don't put it all on the website. Get them to inquire. And then, like Andy said, it's the salesperson's job to make them fall in love. We can't let the website do it all. And then CRM, so that we can together, sales builder and marketers, make data-driven decisions, because that is the best thing about CRM. Lead scoring, following up, sales teams letting the marketers know what you're doing with the stuff that we're providing to you, the stuff, i.e. the people. Yeah. And every lead is gold today.
Yep, I can attest to that. I just want to say, it's whenever Andrew's analogy, it's a long courting process right now. It's a very long courting process. So we're not even married yet. We haven't even thought about getting divorced because we're still courting. So yes, we're continuing to do lots of courting, to Lianne's point, and I agree. And admittedly, from our standpoint, we never utilized CRM to its full potential because we didn't have to. So I think if there are other builders out there that, haven't been, it's never too late, and you have to jump on board. And, for the last few months, we've been starting to make this transition to, better utilization, because whenever you don't need a tool, you don't use it. If you don't need a hammer, you don't need a hammer. But we kind of need that hammer, and we should have been practicing with it longer or previously. But however, it's not too late, and that's where we're at today, to Lianne's point, and I 100% agree with everything she said.
No, and I would second that. From what we saw and just being very intimate with CRMs, is those are a treasure trove of relationships that have been established for years. And I know, we may be coming on the heels of COVID, where, it was just the fog test. If a buyer came on and you put a mirror under and they were breathing, they were going to sign. So there was a huge treasure trove of people that are engaged or people that are thinking about it, that if you're salespeople, use the system, and mark and use it and put down the data. Because too, we got to think about future proofing as well. And if you want to see those gains in AI, it's really around having clean data and process.
Yeah, AI follow-up is something that I spoke about at IBS last year when I spoke on a panel with Touch, actually. And I think a prediction for this year is that is likely to explode. I know that we need the personalized follow-up for sure, but there's ways that we can better utilize AI to do sort of some of that early qualifying to then hand off a more qualified person to the sales team.
Well, that's Andy's idea.
AI is Andy's idea. Oh, I love it.
Well, and actually that gets into our next segment, is around just what does the future hold when it comes to just housing, sales, marketing, financial services, just selling that story. And Lianne, I know you talked about AI, but anything that you're seeing as a must-have or beginning to lay the foundations for how home buyers are going to interact in 2025, 2026 and onward?
In Canada, we've been able to get away with, for a while, not having model homes. We do a lot of pre-construction sales, which I know in the U.S. isn't quite as common, but we'll sell 18-month, 24-month closings. And we are basically selling from a beautiful sales center. And then during COVID, we switched almost entirely to virtual sales. We were closed for a long period of time. So we would create these fabulous portals and websites, send all the information. It was basically like an order taking system, to be honest. There wasn't much sales to it. I love salespeople, but it was just lineups outside and people going on websites and almost buying online, to be honest. So big change, evolution in the Ontario market for sure. And it probably across Canada is just more model homes, more physical spaces. A big challenge is getting those people into the physical sales office because we give so much information on the website. So we are trying to make our model homes more exciting, make our sales centers more exciting. We're doing immersive rooms in a couple of sales centers so that people can also experience the community in like a virtual way, basically. And a lot of email marketing with pictures of salespeople, all the good looking salespeople, get your photos on all your website. And, you got to get those people into the sales office. So make the sales office a more exciting experience.
Wonderful. Well, Mike, how about yourself when it comes to Georgian communities? Is there anything from the trends as well as future predictions when it comes to what's being currently incorporated or Georgian will future incorporate?
Yeah, I guess there's different areas, of that to talk about. But I think from our perspective, we've used Lianne's firm for our Braystone Estates, developed the tagline, "Live Remarkably." So we've since taken that tagline and we now use that more as an overall Georgian communities tagline because we really couldn't come up with anything better. And I remember still reaching out to Lianne saying like, hey, I love this. I want to use some of the wording and some of the stuff that you created, obviously out of respect for Lianne. And, that's where we're at. So I think we need to just continue to share the message about how you can live remarkably at our communities, any one of them, because they all have something unique. I think from our home design processes, we've had the luxury to build with really good products, high-end materials, right? So obviously our building costs are much higher, but for us to try and strike that balance between affordability for our next communities, we're not backtracking what we've currently released, but for the new communities that we're looking at, we need to start looking at how we can still separate ourselves and be different than all the other developers. Obviously everybody's trying to do that. But I think we need to look at more cost-effective materials and still maintain our difference in the market, because like Andrew and I guess it was Lianne or whatever, like it costs a lot. It costs a lot for us as developers to build a house. People have this misconception that driving through this community, it must be they're making a killing here or whatever. You're ripping me off whenever we show a price. And the reality is, we're still, like, compared to Toronto, like if you do the square foot analysis, like we're still very cheap per square foot. So there's not this massive margin I think people think about. So for us to get home prices into a more affordable, we're not going to really have a choice, I don't think, to look at different products. I think the products have to be more flexible. It has to be that we can share with people that this home will work for you today and for the future, because people want to have that confidence where they're not thinking, I'm going to buy this today and I might have to sell it 2-3 years from now. What's that price going to be worth? If people can have confidence that I'm going to be in this home for 10 years, all of a sudden that equity and that price appreciation, it's not quite as important, right? It doesn't really mean anything until you sell it, right? So I think that's what we're looking at for the future, whenever we're looking at new communities, which we do have coming up. That's one of the big factors. And in terms of marketing, I agree with Lianne. I think from my perspective, I need to get much more into storytelling in terms of getting testimonials. I don't know if that's my favorite word, but just more people sharing. I like people sharing how they feel about living in our communities. I think we have to provide more confidence.
Those are your biggest advocates right there.
Yeah,
are the people that are living and breathing that story.
Yeah, that's a big thing for me this upcoming year, amongst many other things I'm working with Lianne on. But I think that's what I want to get to, and simplifying our processes, being much more efficient through all aspects of the business. I do believe, Lianne knows this about me, I believe very much in technology, and that it is the future. And I could talk for hours on where I think that's going to go.
Go on Mike's LinkedIn, guys, because in his side hustle is making AI videos that are incredible. What was the course that you took, Mike? You're a certified something?
Well, it sounds way too good. It makes me. I'm not. It makes me sound more. It's a certified artificial intelligence scientist is the designation that I achieved from the United States Artificial Intelligence Institute. So I'm a big believer in a lot of like the agentic AI, and that there will be agents and more. These chatbots are going to get so great. But beyond that, what I'm experimenting with now is more, because I'm a marketing guy, as Lianne knows. I'm a creative guy. I'm messing around right now more with generative AI. And I can't imagine Lianne would disagree with me that that's going to be a big part of marketing in the future as well. The ability to create videos more quickly, images more quickly, etc.
Well, the character in Chinese for crisis and opportunity are identical. The Mandarin character, that symbol, they're the same. In markets like this is why they're exciting for people like Mike and Lianne and myself is that this crisis breeds innovation.
Yes.
And creativity. And what it does for us is allow us to expand our own thinking, both as an individual builder, developer, but as marketers and sales people, to find ways to innovate in all aspects of everything we're doing, whether that's product design, where we're seeing multi-generational housing within one particular unit. I'm working on now taking a townhouse product and effectively twinning it within itself, so that now I can lower the price effectively by half, but still create a livable environment within one singular unit. We've seen that in threes, we'll see it in twos, we'll see it in fours, modules in a product. We'll see the rental ability of a space doesn't have to be the old classic basement apartment. It might be integrated right through the design of the product that could, frankly, we designed one back in the 80s called the Maximizer, which was at that time in the same kind of recessionary period that house converted from single family to multiple family and back to single family over the life of a 30-year horizon.
Which builder was that, Andy?
Oh, it was actually, I did it, home builders. I did it for the National Association as a concept.
Bring that back. That's great.
We couldn't get it approved anywhere.
Well, I just saw there's a builder in Oshawa who's doing it.
Well, there's lots.
Park and Lane.
We're now reviving that kind of thing. But there's also innovation in finance, and we'll find ways to get working with our lenders to find ways to improve on the financial storyline of how do we actually get someone approved through the process. So Mike will be working on, and his construction guys, on technology innovation. I mean, our friends at Mattamy are developing factory-based product with creating mobile factories next to large-scale developments, so that they've got modular component parts that are being delivered on time to the site, reducing costs by 30%. So it's a revolution going on that is created by this somewhat bit of a catastrophe we're in, or this correction that we're in. And I think that's the good side of it. That's the strong side of it. The challenging side is, how do you start a small building company in Ontario, buy a big one, and wait? So we're in a
just that easy.
Particularly if you're in the high-rise business, because that's going to take several years for that to correct. But so those are the challenges we're facing. But these are the best of times, in many times, because there's going to be some really big winners that come out of this kind of a marketplace that find ways to unlock those keys of innovation.
Adaptability.
Agree.
That's what we need. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
It's the silver lining, Andy. You got to look at the silver lining.
Always.
Stay positive.
Hey, PMA, for those who aren't familiar, stands for positive mental attitude. We changed it when Trump got elected to protect my ass.
Well, that gets to, well, I mean, as we're wrapping up today's segment, that kind of gets into, a question I want to kind of pose to you guys. I usually at the end ask guests, what advice you give to young professionals. But I'd like to kind of go around and say, what advice would you give, those in the current Canadian market, or what advice, or what would you want those that are on the other side of the border, that we have to parse through rhetoric to get reality. And, very rare. And from my perspective, we don't have these type of conversations and candid responses. So I asked for these candid responses, but I'll start with you, Lianne, because I know you're one of the most candid of all.
Advice for Americans?
Of course.
Don't ask me that. I would say, anyways, I'm not a Trump supporter. Andy, is definitely has supported Trump since way back when. So we don't always agree on everything. So I would say protect your democracy. Personally, that's what I would say. But I'm one of those. I think the builders, really, it's about pivoting. It's about being prepared. I know Mike was saying about holding on to staff, and there's a lot of builders that have machines that they've created, and they got to keep the machine running, so they're selling homes for that reason. but you got to spend less. You got to just spend less. And I'm saying that as a supplier of a builder, but we have builders that have in-house teams that they're saying, you know what, that's a big hard cost. That maybe outsourcing makes more sense because it gives them more flexibility from a long-term perspective, cutting costs, stripping features, just creating affordability is what everybody needs. Stop thinking that every consumer wants this giant 2-story massive house. Young people and baby boomers, they want small, they want simple. They are looking at streamlined, minimalist. So go small. I'm a big advocate of tiny homes. I would love to see our builders looking at, building small homes on small lots with adult lifestyle type communities with amenities and a lot of the elements of Georgians communities, but put those into smaller packages. I think, that's one of my big passions actually is maybe convincing a developer to build a small home community, micro homes. They don't have to be like 300 square feet, but they also don't have to be 3,000 square feet, guys.
No. I mean,
not what a consumer wants.
You turn back to 1950s in Levittowns. I mean, you were able to get a 3-bedroom, 1-bath for 900 square feet.
Yeah. And modular, a lot of our clients are interested in modular building. Like Andy said, Madamie's exploring things. But we do, we live in Canada and building in factories makes a lot of sense for us with the weather. The cost per square foot to build modular is not a lot less. Right now, if there was more volume, it could go down, but it's also the time that you save. And like Andy said, it takes 10 years for a development to get approved. So if they could get some different regulations around modular building, I think that we can get the affordability back, which is what we really need.
Well, Mike, that kind of sets you up there as what advice would you...
She touched on 15 things there.
Sorry.
Well, I don't know which lane I'll try and just stay in based on, I agree with everything that Lianne said. And I'll also say, Lianne, if you find a project that you think tiny homes could work, I would, me personally, that I'd be happy to share that in here because I do think as well, that's a big part of what the future can be. I think finding projects where you can get land at a price point that would allow for this.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. I think a lot of builders would do it if it, at the end of the day, if it's not, there's got to be some amount of money to make a profit to pay for everything. So I think that's the biggest problem. And Andrew probably knows even better than I do, but I think that's a big part of it. It's not about, hey, just build smaller homes and sell them cheaper. It's because what the land costs, everything that comes up with the upfront part, that's the part. Yeah. And Andrew touched on that as well. I think if we could figure that out, I guarantee you everybody in this organization would be excited about something like that, to be that, to trailblaze a bit more on that and have some of these, like the amenities that we have right now, but on with smaller homes. I mean, shoot, my daughter is now in Sioux Lookout. Okay. My daughter's now 15 plus hours away from me. She was able to buy her first home at 25 years old. She was 400. Now she's a really good saver and whatnot, right? At 25, but the home was 400 something thousand. And here in Barrie, it would be double. Like, and it's a nice home, but it would be double. It's way out of her wheelhouse. So I look at that personally too. Like, it's too bad that my daughter kind of feels that way. I want to have a home, Dad. I don't want to, I want to have a home. It's important to me. I want to have a family. I want to have a yard. And I think that's amazing, but she could not get that here. Like, she could not get that here. And she obviously had another job opportunity too, which took her out that way. But I 100% agree, because whenever you think about the future and, her kids and, whenever they come around, like, what does that look like? Like, it's such a profound, whenever you really start to think about the future and, not to get too heavy, but we're dealing with a lot of serious things ahead of us, and we really do have to, come together and not to get too sappy, but also the advice just to we just got to start being kind again. Like, we just have to start, like, put down X, like you put down, like, get rid of the cringe as much as possible. And I get it. We're all on social media to some extent, but I think just like what how do I act that's going to make me be a good person? I think if we all just said that and reminded ourselves all the time, like, again, it sounds too simple and it sounds silly probably, but, you know, I really think in today's time with so much chaos, like I said the other day on the phone, I feel like the world's going the wrong direction. Like at this point in our life, there should be less war. Things should be more affordable. There should be more opportunities. And I feel like every time we get on a conversation, it can kind of be a bit negative, right? So anyway, that was
Great.
too much, but
Mike,
Well,
President.
yeah.
really, I love
Shift the
kindness.
conversation. Agree.
I love kindness. My 96-year-old uncle Walter, when I asked him at Christmas what would he change in the world that he's seen through his 96 years, and he said the only thing I'd change is be more courteous to one another. And I thought that was a brilliant perception. I would say to my American friends, no one of us is as great as both of us together. And the opportunity to be a North American powerhouse in whatever areas that we want to be the best in the world at, I would remind the Americans that Canada invented football in 1871. Between McGill and Harvard was the first game. That funny game, basketball, was invented by a guy named Smith, I think it was. Or I forget now. I'm going to lose that. Yeah, at the turn of the century. So don't take for granted a Canadian relationship that has been perhaps, or may even appear to be, as singularly more beneficial one side to the other. It isn't. We're better and stronger together. We'll continue to be. And go back to Mike's being an approach that is full of more kindness and courtesy than bombast and abrasion. And unfortunately, we're in a position where the Trump thump is more, in some ways, about that abrasion and bombast than it is about courtesy and kindness. And if we shared a little more of that, I think we'd find ways of. We have so much in common, and we have so much strength together. We are much better and greater as one. But that doesn't mean a 51st state.
Okay.
No,
Thank you.
I hope a continuation of excellent partnership that's been since our foundation. So, panelists from down south here, thank you for sharing the perspective and being a breath of fresh air and helping us kind of navigate the rhetoric, well, the reality versus the rhetoric. So, thank you all.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Lianne. Thanks, Mike. I
Thank
enjoyed
you.
that very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.